action-packed meeting. You can probably see in our chat that our agenda is a really strong list of speakers today. So thank you so much to our panelists. We are talking about everything that we're coming into. So wildfire, smoke, air quality, and extreme heat. But we're doing it, of course, from a communications perspective, sharing resources, best messaging, and how we can work together and support each other through this incoming season. For anyone that doesn't know, my name is Jamie Cuddy. I use she, her pronouns. I am a co-chair for this group, the RGIS, the Regional Joint Information System. My co-chair, my partner in this group is Sarah Dean. Sarah, if you want to intro yourself here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Dean. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Multnomah County Health Department PIO. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today.
So let's see, we will begin. I believe Laura has the floor first. Oh, I did want to note, I see that somebody's robot is here, somebody's AI note taker. Totally cool. I don't know if the person whose robot it is even on the call right now, but last time when the robot was here, they sent out notes to the group and we noticed inaccuracies. So if there's anything you can do to not blast out your notes to our group, I would really appreciate it. Okay, and we'll turn it over to Laura.
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, everyone. Laura Hall with the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. We have such a wonderful full agenda today, so I'm going to try to move rapidly so that we can get to the guest speakers. And I've put a lot of what I want to say in the notes document for you so that I can go quickly and not have you miss things. So I'm going to start off talking about our RGIS framework and some resources I want to bring to everyone's attention that are related to the theme of this meeting. And then down at the bottom of the notes, there's a situational awareness section where I left some pretty dense notes. And there's two topics in there that are not related to wildfire and heat, but are important, actually three topics, important for all of our regional PIOs to know. The elections toolkit is linked in there, and our Secretary of State has asked us to help boost those messages as we get closer to the November elections. So that's not for any action right now, but in the coming months, we'll remind you of that. And then some information about that I-5 closure. And then a little bit of information about what's happening here this summer in regards to the World Cup. We're not a host city, but there will be a team staying in Portland, and there will be what we call a fan zone in Vancouver. And we expect a whole lot of travelers and visitors to the area, people passing through, and a lot of parties. So there is some information there for you. And one of the things I wanted everybody to know about, which is really great and actually related to the RGIS conversation, is that we're partnering with Seattle King County. They're creating a bunch of messages to prepare for, they are a host city and they've got a lot of planning to do. And they just yesterday sent a bunch of messages to translation. And fortunately, I got to participate in the creation of those messages, and many of them will benefit our region beyond World Cup. And so we'll be adding those translations to our messaging library on the publicalerts.org website, which is really fantastic. So now I'll go back up and continue to talk about the RGIS. The Regional Joint Information System, we had a tabletop exercise April 29th. We invited mostly the RGIS leadership folks, our regional alert and warning partners, some state partners, and a handful of subject matter experts that were relevant to the scenario we were working on, which was hazardous materials. We chose that particular topic because we know that that's an area of weakness in terms of prepared messaging for our area. And there were about 40 people who attended. We do want to recreate that particular tabletop later this year, ideally, and invite more people from the more RGIS members to participate. I think it was a really great opportunity to learn about how our new RGIS framework will serve us and get some feedback on it. So we will be making some edits to the RGIS framework in the next month. I'll keep the entire RGIS listserv updated on those edits, and then we will finalize the document and get it approved by our regional steering committee. And then it will no longer be called the draft framework. It will be the framework. And we'll put it on the RDPO website. We do currently have a page for PIOs for this work group. It's rdpo.org/PIO, and we'll be changing the name of the group from PIO work group to RGIS. So those are our next steps. There is a slide deck presented here in your notes just for if you want to share with people about what this group is. And one of the things that came out of the tabletop exercise was a recommendation to create more materials to share with other folks in the community about what the RGIS is, particularly our leadership folks, to ensure that they understand what this group is, how their agencies are participating, and the potential for the RGIS as we move forward. Related to that is who is and who is not included currently in our RGIS. And so I have a link to the roster, and I keep encouraging folks to go look at it with an eye for which agencies are missing, because we know there are a lot of agencies missing. There is a link in there that you can share with folks to say, hey, I think you should be included in our RGIS. Here's the link to sign up. Any questions about the RGIS framework, tabletop, etc.? Okay. The other thing I just wanted to share this morning was a reminder about the translated tools on the publicalerts.org website. Also a reminder that on that page, the messaging tools page, there's a form at the bottom where we take requests for additional messages. So as we go through this summer and as things happen, if you look at the existing translation library and you see gaps in the messages, please use that form to submit requests for when we have a future round of funding, we can consider that message to be included in the translation work. I also included a link to a handout that we created a few months ago. We gave a presentation on wildfire to the RDPO policy committee. So that's elected representatives, county and city chairs and commissioners, and a couple of mayors. We wanted to give them a pre-wildfire season briefing. And one of the things that we did was we gave them some advice about public messaging and some information about public messaging. That handout includes what we gave to the policy committee, and some of that messaging is regarding their relationship to public information. And so I encourage you all to go look at that portion of the document, because if you're a PIO that interacts with leadership, there's some good tips and messages in there to share. One of the things that we shared with policy committee during that meeting was updates to our regional social vulnerability mapping project that Metro has been helping work on over the years. The latest round of updates for that project take social vulnerability mapping and they overlay our hazards. And so now we can see where we have a high density of vulnerable populations as well as really high wildfire risk. And so that's a resource that we're encouraging all of our planners, all of our politicians and our emergency managers to start using. And I think it can also inform public and information warning. Okay, any questions about any of that? I do have to hop off this call shortly. I'm going to go join a seminar that's happening for public health folks. They are talking about chemical release, and I'm actually going to go tell them about what a great idea it is to have a regional joint information system when we have a large scale hazardous materials incident. So thank you all for being here. And if you have any questions before I leave, I'm happy to field those. All right.
Laura, this is Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
It's not so much a question as since you're cross-pollinating meetings, If you could let folks know if they're on that disaster communicators public health list. We're going to do a tabletop in June on chemical hazards.
Okay, great. I will let them know. Thanks.
Okay, thanks,
June
Laura.
25th, more specifically.
June 25th. Okay, thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everyone.
Couple more housekeeping items that I remembered. Sarah Dean is taking our notes today. Thank you, Sarah. So if you are a presenter, or really all of us, I think, if you have resources or slides, web pages that you want us to get out to the entire group in the notes, please email them to Sarah and I, and we'll get them out. And if you happen to get the blast out from the robot, I would just caution you that it might not be accurate, and we have a real human taking notes. It's difficult, and she's killing it, I'm sure. So just rely on Sarah's notes. And then the other thing is that I mentioned this is an action-packed agenda, so I'm actually timekeeping. So I'm going to ask everybody to try to stick to your time. Don't be offended if I give you the hook. And we will continue this conversation in the chat and one-on-one and however we need to get ourselves connected through this season. So the next update. Oh, but we did leave time for questions if we can stick to the agenda. And the final thing is, you might have noticed that we have Jamie Bash here. She is a highly respected crisis communicator from OHA. And she is not a panelist today, but she's here to answer questions and to, certainly interject when there's something specific that Jamie wants to add. So thanks for being here, Jamie, and everyone. Okay, so I am up next. I am timing myself to keep it brief. And basically, I'm sharing out notes. We didn't invite a weather specialist, or we didn't invite, National Weather Service or DEQ or anything like that to give us an update. So I'm sharing the notes from a DEQ climate outlook meeting that occurred in mid-May. I probably can't answer questions because it wasn't my meeting, but I'll share some key points, and then I'll put their notes from the meeting in our chat. So basically, I think I'll do that now so you can just sort of follow along. I'm not going to read everything from these notes, but I'll flag a few things that felt important to me that I highlighted. So basically, I think we've heard what we're in for this summer, and it's looking like the June, July, and August climate outlook. We're expecting somewhat to significantly above average temperatures. We're expecting normal to somewhat above average precipitation. And oh wait, I'm sorry, below. We're expecting normal to below average precipitation. That's what we've all been hearing. Drought development is very likely. In fact, it's already been declared in several places. And then for the May, June, July, August fire potential outlook, we have warmer and drier conditions trending toward a 2015 or 2018 style fire season. There are dead fuels already in a June dryness state as early as May. So we're showing that fuel is looking flammable as if it were currently May. I'm sorry, as if it were currently June. Southwest Washington and Northwest Oregon are entering above normal fire risk starting in June. El Nino, always a wild card, right? So El Nino conditions begin the end of July. And then speaking of wild cards, monsoon and lightning will be our wild cards. And then for May, which I know we're heading out of, but the winter snowpack is well below average. I'm sure you've heard that already. And the current snowpack leans toward 3 to 5 weeks earlier to start fire season. We're starting fire season 3 to 5 weeks earlier based on snowpack. So those, and then you'll see in the notes that there's a link from OHA to air quality and health outcomes dashboard, to their dashboard. And OHA is available for wildfire coordination and subject matter expert calls for events greater than for events that occur greater than 24 hours. not available on weekends for that. So that's my best attempt at, oh, I never hit send on this. Send, there we go. These are the notes I just gave you. So yeah, that is the climate and weather outlook. Does anyone want to add anything to that?
This is Jamie. I'll just add in that it's smoke events expected to be unhealthy for sensitive groups or worse for 24 hours or longer. And DEQ is not available on the weekends to issue advisories. However, I've talked with the OHA staff on, and if local public health called us to try and figure out should they do something communications wise or not at the local level, we'll support them in making those decisions.
Great, thank you. Good addition. So now we are going to switch gears to a bit of a social science learning perspective. I'm very excited that we can welcome Dr. Afrous, oh, that's my timer, Dr. Afrous Mosanai. Sorry about that pronunciation. I'm just going to turn it right over to you, and thanks again for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen to share some visuals with you. It's taking its time. While it's getting loaded, thanks a lot for having me today. It's a pleasure to be able to share the findings of our recent study with you. Thanks a lot to Sarah for inviting me. I have a PhD in journalism and media studies, and I'm also a research affiliate at the Yale program on climate change communication. And my interest in visual communication and also the importance of climate change has led me to conduct studies like this, that I'm going to share the results of it with you. And just I'm so glad that I have the chance to share all of this with you, given what's going on in the next few months, maybe even right now, to us. So without any further ado, generally data tell us that heat waves are increasing both in frequency and intensity, and still public risk perception remains low. One of the reasons for that is that heat is generally an invisible hazard. So today I'm presenting a research-backed strategic framework grounded in social psychology and communication studies to help us really bridge the gap between scientific warnings and public worry using imagery that actually works. So to give you a little bit of a context, in the visual landscape of climate disasters, extreme heat suffers from what we might be able to call a drama deficit. Take other examples. When we communicate wildfires, we can very easily go and find a towering wall of orange flame in a forest and visualize what's happening. Or when it comes to floods, we can really easily use images of submerged neighborhoods. But then when it comes to some other deadly climate threat, the heat wave, the story gets a little different. Several content analysis studies have studied the coverage of heat waves, and they found that there's a tendency for media to use vacation imagery. So ice cream, children playing in the fountains, crowded beaches and pools. And as an example that might be familiar with some of you because of the geographical importance of it, during the 2021 Western North America heat dome, a study shows that only 16% of media images actually depicted heat as a public health hazard, even though it was a catastrophic event that claimed hundreds of lives. The rest of the images were either neutral or even conveyed some sort of summer holiday vibe. So let's see with that in mind what we can do about it. So the strategy that I'm going to present today is based on a large-scale survey experiment that we conducted talking to around 4,000 US adults. Our participants in our study were shown a mock Instagram post like what you're seeing here on the screen, and which was a picture and with a extreme heat and climate change brief text. So basically, we focus on a main factor, the emotional tone of the image. In other words, the overall vibe or the feeling that the image created. So we tested whether the positive or neutral or the negative feeling of the image would change the way people react to the exact same warning message about heat waves. And here is an important methodological detail, and that's that to make sure the results we were seeing were really about the emotional tone and not caused by specific photo characteristics, for example, one particular facial expression or a color palette or just a specific photo. We used several different images in each of our categories. So we have 3 images for positive tone, 3 for neutral, and 3 for negative. And basically, every participant read the same text explaining what heat waves are, how dangerous they can be, and that the climate change has made extreme heat 3 times more likely. And the only thing that changed between participants was the image that was pairing with that message and they saw. So jumping into the findings, I would say that the most urgent and important finding for every media professional in this room, including myself, is that we really should stop using positive imagery for disaster events. Our results show that pairing a heat warning with a cheerful image like people having fun at a pool does not work at all. These kinds of images did not increase people's concern about extreme heat or their beliefs about the fact that climate change is making extreme heats worse. One possible explanation for this result comes from psychology and behavioral science. So positive images can really signal safety and comfort to the brain, which weakens the sense of danger and the warning that text is trying to communicate. Since people often notice and process images before they read the text, because images are more attention grabbing, they're just easier to digest, the visual strongly shapes how the message is understood. So even, especially in the world of social media, people could spend only 1 second on a social media post, only looking at the image without really even reading the text. So as a result, a serious and potentially deadly heat event may come across as something harmless, manageable, or even enjoyable. Sarah was kind enough to share some of the examples of the official Instagram account of the Multnomah County. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Where we can see some posts from 2024 and 2025 where there's some general tips and warnings about heat wave, how to cope with it, how to protect ourselves, paired with some very fun and pleasant visuals of people having fun during the summertime. So what to do instead, now that we cannot use positive imagery? If we really want people to recognize heat waves as a serious risk, the message needs to activate brain's attention and danger detection systems. So our data show that both negative and neutral images increase concern about heat waves, with neutral images performing a little better even than compared to the negative one. It's very important that neutral image was also effective, maybe as effective or slightly more effective than negative image, because generally we keep hearing that there is a risk of alienating our audience if we show them terrifying images or if we just be super alarming about the message we're communicating to them. So our data shows that simpler visuals, like people have been doing physical labor or trying to stay hydrated with water bottles without really conveying any explicit sort of symbol of exhaustion or anything like that, can still create a strong sense of heat, exhaustion, and physical strain. These images make the warning feel more real and also relatable by connecting it to everyday experiences of the audiences. Both types of these images also strengthen people's belief that climate change is making extreme heats worse. So another important just message to convey to the audience. And then one last point about using positive images suggested by some social media strategists. Generally, there is this belief that if we use positive images, there's a more chance of having more likes or getting more shares. But what we found was that the tone of the images we used did not affect the people's willingness to want to share that piece of social media content that they just saw. So we can, again, easily avoid positive images. Another very important and interesting finding was that we also tested whether or not prior exposure to heat wave over the past 3 years before the survey was conducted played a role in the way that images and our experiment affected audiences. Among those who already had experienced heat waves, our images and our total experiment was not effective. They didn't change the way that they were thinking about and perceiving of heat waves. But among those who hadn't experienced heat waves recently, the risk perception was heightened and increased. So again, it's very important which audience you're talking to. If it's among those who already haven't experienced this, there's even an extra piece of importance there not to use positive imagery. So to wrap up, we must align our visuals with our message. So I would say that there are three main takeaways here. First, it's important to prioritize congruency. So the feeling of the image must match the seriousness of the text. We definitely need to abandon the pool and the beach and stop using vacation imagery to mask climate disasters. And also, we need to trust neutral images. If we don't want to frighten our audience and not to build worry in an explicit and significant way, we can use some authentic images of mild labor and hydration, which are powerful research-backed tools for building risk perception. One last note about the little methodological piece that I shared with you. As I said, in each of our emotional categories, we have 3 images. It's very important to know that not all the images in each of those categories behave identically. So among the 3 negative images we had, for instance, only 2 of them were effective. Only 2 of them increased the risk perception of heat waves. Among the neutral ones, only 1 of them did so. So even though we got this general finding that positive images are not effective at all, regardless of the type of image, we saw some variation between neutral and negative images. And unfortunately, in this study, we were not testing what type of neutral or what type of negative images are useful. So we don't know for sure what exactly to show the audience. And that would be some topic for future research. And I hope we do it or someone else do some visual content analysis so that we can have better informed communication strategies for the future. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions. And after this, I just need to hop off and go back to work. So I'll just be staying for a few minutes.
Questions for Dr. Frus?
Yeah, I have a question comment, I suppose. Hi, Ellen Gordon from Clean Water Services. I was typing this in the comments, and then I think you answered it kind of right at the end there about types of images and which may be more effective. Because I was curious if using faces and people specifically versus images of like just a very bright sun or something else that would be visual for heat, if there was a comparable difference between how people engaged with those posts. And the reason that I bring it up is because on my team, we are exploring that faces and people are getting better engagement than like visual scenery. But I'm wondering if that also would impact perception beyond engagement. But you did kind of mention that right at the end that types of images I was not really included in the study, but I think that's a good thing to keep in mind as we move through this topic. So thank you for your presentation. Very helpful, very insightful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And yes, that's very important. Again, we didn't do an official study of that, but I can share here. You can see the 3 images of our negative category. And the 2 images that were effective were the second and the third one, those with human beings and facial expressions in them. The first one without any human did not have any effect, even though it very clearly cautions about extreme heat. So based on prior literature, there is a high chance of seeing some sort of just a live creature, human, animals, anything that would convey some emotional sympathy, probably is going to be more effective. Again, we cannot say if exactly this is the reason that our second and third negative images here were impactful and not the first one, but definitely that's a possibility and something that other research has pointed out to. So I guess that's relatively a safe guess to work around.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I was just curious if you saw any correlations to like specific population groups. I know a lot of times we're working as communicators to communicate at a mass communications level, but we're also massaging things for specific audiences. So I didn't know what kind of demographic correlations you were able to do based on the study size. It's a big sample, but it's also not a big sample when you think about statistical
Yeah.
significance. So
Yeah, we definitely tested some demographics, and I would say among those that we checked, none were significant. So it didn't matter people from which race or ethnicity are seeing these samples, these experiments. Gender did not matter, age did not matter, education did not matter, and very importantly and interestingly, political ideology did not matter either. So there are a lot of social science and communication studies that say, especially in the realm of climate change communication, where say that those who tend to be more Republican generally are either not affected or much less affected compared to Democrats and independents. That was not the case in our study, and I would say that there's a lot of research to provide a logical reason behind that. But in a nutshell, and if I want to connect it to this study, study shows that if we are talking about something that is not polarized, health, economy, well-being, family, it doesn't matter which political spectrum people are coming from. They want to be healthy, they want to protect their families, so it doesn't matter what they're thinking and which political candidate they're supporting. So because we were not really focusing so much on climate change and not necessarily relating this to climate change and very heavily focusing on heat waves themselves, I would say that our audiences, that like alarm was not rang, so they were able to understand what was going on and just be ready for what's coming. So yeah.
Any other questions before we move along? All right, thank you again. I think this group found this really beneficial. There have been a few requests for your slides, if you wouldn't mind sharing them with Sarah so that we can get them out to our even larger group. And we really appreciate you being here. And we also understand you're going to drop off because you have other things to do. So I'm moving us along. We are going to hear from some professionals from Multnomah County Public Health. That's researcher Abe Molland and environmental health communicator Scott Mosier. So
They
take it
might
away.
not be on the call yet. They were jumping from another meeting, so we might have to flip.
No problem.
Sorry, Jamie.
Oh, no, no problem at all. Okay, what about Clackamas County Community Outreach, the topic of wildfire and smoke with Emily Merkland?
Hey, good morning. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Let me just pull up my slide deck real quick.
Thanks, Emily.
Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Looks
Awesome.
good.
Okay, great. So my name's Emily Merkland. I'm a community planning coordinator for Clackamas County Disaster Management. Also on this call is Gary Johnson. I believe she's still here. She works for our Public and Government Affairs department at Clackamas County, and she was pretty instrumental in what I'm going to share with you guys today. Um, so Laura had asked me to talk about our Mount Hood corridor wildfire messaging and community engagement. So I want to share a few reasons why we've been so focused on wildfire messaging and community engagement in the Mount Hood corridor. The community members and groups that have made it possible to connect with folks living in that area, the way we've partnered with them through community engagement and outreach, and what we've learned. I'll just say that my experience with wildfire messaging and community engagement work in the corridor is really focused on evacuation planning, and that's led or will lead into our BCLAT Go Prepared campaign. So I'll share more information about that as I go along. This is one of our cute little videos from our BCLAT Go Prepared campaign, which I'll highlight here. All right, so as I said, I've been focused in this area because of evacuation and our BCLAC Go Prepared campaign. And I want to explain why and who we've been involved with in this area. So the Mount Hood corridor, shown here in the bottom right corner, has some pretty unique evacuation needs, which have been highlighted in recent years. As you guys probably all know, there's been many incidents that have required evacuations. And this area is particularly tricky when issuing evacuations because there's limited in and out roadways, so limited evacuation routes. Additionally, public safety power shutoff impacts communication in this area, so folks may not be able to receive alerts as well, or they might just be recreating in the area and not have cell phone service if we issue an evacuation, which makes it harder to reach this population. And then we have many tourists and people recreating in the area who maybe are unfamiliar with the area, could be, not signed up for public alerts. But those are just a few reasons why. And then I want to highlight how we've been able to connect with folks in this area, and specifically the WHO is the Mount Hood Corridor Wildfire Partnership. Their sort of about us statement is there, but it's a group of federal, state, county, and local agencies, including CPOs and HOAs, that come together on a monthly basis to talk about the corridor and the issues that they have related to wildfire. And through working with them and tapping into that group, we've really been able to gain a deeper understanding of the needs in that community. And they've also been able to connect us to community members to understand the unique needs that they have. So a bit about our outreach and engagement methods. So for this area, we've taken a couple approaches to understanding how we might message to them and what messages might resonate with them. So for our CLAC Go Prepared campaign, we thoughtfully focused our focus groups in the rural communities, especially along the corridor. So you'll see in that green image of the county with the stars on it, those are where we held our focus groups leading into the campaign. And in those focus groups, we asked a number of questions about evacuation preparedness, experience, wildfire preparedness. We really wanted to understand, where people were at with evacuation thoughts and feelings, how they might get communication from us, and where they're looking for communication. We also had a survey as a part of this work to inform our campaign, and that included a piece where people could share the experiences they may have had with evacuation in recent years. And then we knew for this campaign, we really wanted to create images and messages that would resonate with our rural residents, and that would also resonate with our tourists who are visiting wildfire areas, which is a tricky group to message to because they're two very different populations. And then I'll talk about this in the next slide, but we found out that there was an emerging need to create some new evacuation preparedness maps through our community outreach and engagement leading into this campaign. This bottom picture here is from our focus groups. You'll see we put out a postcard and a flyer, paid people for their participation. I just want to call this out. I'm sure all of you know that's a best practice, but feeding people and paying them really got them to come to the table and talk to us. And we held all of these focus groups in person with a marketing and community engagement company, and had little to no county representation, so people could speak freely about their experiences. So here are some of the learnings from those focus groups and surveys, and I would say, there's many, many more since we, opened the survey to the entire county, and some of the focus groups were in rural areas, but not necessarily in the corridor. But here are some that are specifically from the corridor area. For alerts, PSPS came up again, lack of cell service, difficult to get those alerts. And then again, tourists who are visiting the area might not be signed up for those alerts, so might not be getting that timely, crucial information. For evacuation routes, I already touched on this, limited in and out. That was confirmed through all of our outreach and engagement. And again, tourists are sometimes unfamiliar with roadways or aren't sure where they are. They might be staying at an Airbnb or just visiting for the day. And we heard that there was a real interest in receiving and sharing printed evacuation maps and having those posted year round, since again, self-service and familiarity with the area can be tricky. For preparedness, sometimes knowing where to start was overwhelming. And sometimes finances were a barrier to even beginning, a go kit or 2 weeks ready kind of kit at their house. And then finally, for communication preferences, we heard a real desire for radio communications, especially when there's a lack of power. So kind of going old school and listening to the radio or communicating through radio was something that folks in that area shared as a need and a real crucial communication mode. Additionally, public officials sharing information on site and being present in person was something that they really craved and asked us for. And again, printed materials, going back to printed materials really felt important to them. I want to touch on this mapping piece before I jump to the end here, but as I mentioned earlier, there was an emerging need throughout this engagement and outreach that the evacuation maps that we were going to share out as a part of our BCLAC Go Prepared campaign just weren't going to cut it for this area. You'll see this top map here. This is the original map that we created with Hoodland Fire, and it's pulled out too far. We needed something more granular with smaller streets and roadways, especially because there's so few roadways to evacuate out through. We also heard the need for elevation and topography. We heard the need that folks wanted directional arrows, especially for those who were from different areas and visiting for the day. They might not be sure which direction, Sandy is or Mount Hood is. Additional labeling on roadways. So we held a couple work sessions with our Mount Hood Corridor Wildfire Partnership work groups to work through these maps. You'll see on that bottom image, we highlighted and marked up maps and asked them exactly what they would change about them and how they might become more useful, not only for them, but for the tourists that they knew would be visiting their neighborhood. And so this past year, we've worked with our GIS department and with the corridor to refine these maps. So this is a picture of what they look like today. But I feel like this was a real win for us to be able to sit down with this group again and come up with something that was actually more useful for them and that they're excited to share. So I'll leave you with this. This is how our campaign turned out. So from all the information that we learned from our surveys, focus groups, and work with a partnership, we have a social media campaign that we will, well, not just social media, but a big chunk of it is social media and paid media campaign that will happen every single year. Last year was the initial launch of it based on all of that information we gathered, and we're working to refine it and build it out every single year. So here are a couple of the images. In that bottom corner, the BCLAC Go Prepared. This is a paper handout postcard that we give to folks when we do tabling events, when we go to those corridor meetings, when we're out talking to people. This image in the middle here speaks to the wildfire concerns. We have a couple different images that focus on, the rural experience and being in nature. And then this video here that I'll just play quickly is geared toward folks who might be recreating in the area. So you may see this campaign depending on where you live. We have target demographics. A lot of that is our rural residents and residents who have livestock or families. But we have display ads, radio ads, videos, all over social media. So yeah, I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
All right. Thanks so much, Emily. Are you sticking around in case any other questions come up? It's okay if you can't.
Yep, I'll be here till 11:30, but I have to drop off right then. So
Okay, great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Bonnie from the Regional Water Providers Consortium. I'm curious what your ad buy budget is, and what it costs to develop the materials that you've got. And then I'm also curious if you have the ads that you've developed in languages other than English.
Yeah, great question. So all of the outreach and engagement we did it both in English and Spanish. We also did that was including focus groups and one-on-one interviews, which I didn't touch on that, but we also did our survey in Ukrainian and Russian, not with a lot of participation, so that was a lesson learned for us. Maybe a different mode in engaging with that audience in future years. Um, so yes, we ended up having all of the materials that I showed here, plus everything that you'll see online. It's all in English and Spanish. And then we want to build that out to the top 5 languages. And then we're also working this year, as of course, I think everyone is, to meet the accessibility requirements. So making sure that all of our images and our captions match and that it's accessible no matter how you're receiving the content. The contractor that we worked with to create this outreach and engagement and then the campaign, I think we paid them like $70,000 maybe. And then it was myself, another person from my office, and our public and government affairs team at Clackamas County was really involved. So hard to quantify how much work there, but a lot of time spent there. Our ad budget last year was 50,000. This year it's 13,000. So pretty big difference in terms of what we have access to. But I will say last year we ran all of our social through our third-party marketing company who then did ad buys. And this year we're doing all of our own social media because we already have it created and we know how to do it. So we were able to save money that way too. Does that answer your questions? Did I miss one?
No, that's great. Thanks so much for the context and information. I'm
Yeah.
really excited to see how this continues.
Go ahead, Laura.
Thanks. Hey, Emily, out of curiosity, what firm do you use? We're casting about for a firm ourselves, and so
Yeah, are
wondering
you
who you use.
thinking for media buys?
Potentially, yeah.
So for media buys, Gary, if you're still on, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's affiliated media.
Hmm.
I can send you the contact information. They've been fantastic. Justin is our
That'd be
contact
great.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put his
Yes,
information in the
Justin
chat.
at Affiliated Media. That's correct.
Thanks, Gary.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions for Gary and Emily? Okay, thanks for that. If anything pops into your head, feel free to put it in the chat, and they'll be monitoring until I think 11:30. And then we're gonna go to Multnomah County Public Health, Abe Mulland and Scott Mosher.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the invite to join this space. Sorry, we're a little late. My name is Abe Mullen. You see him. I'm a research and evaluation analyst with the Healthy Homes and Communities team in the Environmental Health Program in the Multnomah County Health Department. And Scott, do you want to present yourself?
Yeah, I'm Scott Mosher, also use he, him pronouns. I'm the communications coordinator in environmental health for Multnomah County.
And I am going to rapidly relearn how to share a slide deck in Teams. Let's see. Go to that tab, start at the beginning, start a slideshow. Does that look okay to folks? Okay, some thumbs up. All right. So we're here to talk about our summer seasonal hazard messaging. I'll open up with some data from our most recent seasonal hazard report to contextualize the information that we'll share. And then Scott will talk more about our messaging and share some resources at the end. And also a quick PSA that it is heat.gov Heat Week. Today is Thursday, the day of outdoor recreation and heat safety messaging. Just a couple key messages related to outdoor recreation on this slide. For distribution on social media, drink more water than you're used to, don't wait. Especially thinking about drinking water the day before an outdoor event that you know you're participating in or going to go spectate. Pace yourself, take it easy. I think a key message, if folks had an opportunity to tune into the National Integrated Heat and Health Information Services webinar that was a couple weeks ago about outdoor heat and safety. Specifically, that was a really good resource I'd recommend, and they elevated not just focusing on athletes, but thinking about spectators and staff that are participating in those events as well. Take breaks in cool places and know the signs of heat-related illness. And I think this is especially relevant for this year where we saw those impacts last year. The Hood to Coast Relay was on one of the hottest weekends of the summer. Here's a quote from a runner: "Water is a resource that needs to be shepherded, but it's also a human right that everybody should have access to water." I saw so many people running on really exposed sunny courses, not carrying water, without water on their backs, and I've just felt like that didn't seem like a realistically safe way to proceed from a participant, and that showed up in the data. We saw 8 heat-related emergency room and urgent care visits from Hood to Coast alone last year. So yeah, just, there's a continued need for that. And looking at the entire summer overall, this is a chart from our seasonal hazard report. And we saw that just over half of all emergency room and urgent care visits for heat-related illness happened during 3 weekend, 14 days total, which overlap with a lot of outdoor community events. So early in the season, from June 7th through June 9th, the Rose Festival, Parade, and City Fair happened during the first heat spike of the season. And then later in August, we had those 2 heat waves that overlap with a lot of community events like the Grand Prix of Portland, the Providence Bridge Pedal, the Hawthorne Street Fair, Hood to Coast, and the Foodie Land Festival. And from the Foodland Festival alone, it happened in a big parking lot at the Expo Center. And we saw another 8 ambulance deployments to that event. So I need to focus on outdoor events for messaging and intervention. And this chart just shows the time series distribution of daily percentage of heat-related emergency and urgent room care visits for the total season. That's color-coded by daily heat risk. So purple being extreme risk. We didn't have any of those days last season, but you can see the prominent days of major risk and moderate risk where we saw more visits occur proportionally on those days. So to zoom out a little bit, back looking at the trends that we saw in heat-related outcomes in Multnomah County last summer compared to previous years, for emergency medical system encounters, so ambulance deployments and emergency room and urgent care center visits, we saw slight increases in those compared to last season, and those continue to be of concern, the short acute heat-related outcomes, but we saw little to no change in hospital stays and fatalities, which is a good thing. And just to caveat on the fatality number, that some of those numbers are still preliminary. So still continue need to focus on short-term acute exposures and related health outcomes. We also looked at who was impacted most. So we aggregated 2 years of information to be able to share out every demographic group that's within our emergency room and urgent care center database. And over the past 2 summers, residents who are white, ages 18 to 44, or male had the highest counts. But we saw American Indian or Alaskan Native and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders have the highest visit rates. 2 other things I'll call out on this slide that we saw the only significant difference within a subgroup in the sex subgroup. So men were statistically at higher risk of going to the emergency room or urgent care center compared to women, and that was the only intra-subgroup difference we saw. And also when looking at the age demographic categories, we saw decreases in all of those outcomes except for the age bucket of 45 to 64, where that was where we saw an increase compared to the previous two-year season. And then looking at these visit counts and averages by heat risk, the largest number of visits last summer happened on moderate heat days. So we saw 70 visits occur on days with moderate heat risk, but 3 times as many visits occurred on days with major risk. So there's a need for unique messaging on both of those to highlight the major risk for everybody, but also on moderate days, those that may not be thinking about heat at the forefront of their mind when they're going out and enjoying community events, that there are some groups that may be affected in those conditions as well. And then I think this is my final slide before I hand it off to Scott, but thinking about air quality and health outcomes, this is a chart that shows the daily emergency room and urgent care visit counts for chronic respiratory conditions like asthma, bronchitis, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease by air quality index. for the past 10 years. So big zoom out on the data and that lens. And we see that emergency room urgent care visits increase when the air quality worsens. This isn't novel or new, but we have the data to show that there are significant increases in visit counts when the air pollution increases and when wildfire smoke is present in our community. So there are on average 84 visits for chronic respiratory conditions on days that have good air quality compared to 118 in hazardous conditions. And with that, I'll pass it over to Scott.
Before I jump into this specific slide, I just wanted to touch on, this is Heat Week, and just to highlight a couple things that we're doing. We are posting each day about Heat Week on different topics, and so basically aligning with the national topics, but made it very local and created our own graphics and the like. And we also launched our audio streaming campaign. So it started on the 15th of May. We will run through August 15th. And we are focusing on two specific targets. So that's men 50 plus, age 50 plus, and veterans. Those are two specific populations that we've identified as ones that we want to really get messages to. So we created two different ads, and we're running those throughout the summer. And we also, in an effort to increase our frequency, we have focused on 12 specific zip codes within the county. So it's one of the nice things about the streaming audio is that we're able to do that focus. And the 12 were chosen and identified through AIDS work and sort of identifying which specific zip codes have those elevated heat vulnerabilities. And then we're also focusing this year, kind of new for us, or something we're paying closer attention to, is this combination of extreme heat and wildfire smoke. Recognizing that this could be and probably will be a difficult summer around smoke. And then like how do we talk to folks around that combination? Recent scientific evidence has shown that the two combined can be actually much worse for our health. But also want to recognize that overheating is really more dangerous than smoke for most people at risk, and that's in the moment. Over time, smoke is really difficult, but on a sort of on the moment, overheating is where we really want to make sure we're focused. But ultimately, it's cool, clean air, indoor air is the best way to protect yourself. Next slide. So our key heat plus, messaging that's around the heat and smoke is get cool first, stay indoors, cool, clean air is the goal. And if you have a medical condition or you're in a vulnerable population, you should be talking to your doctor to make a plan. So we want to get some messaging out in a preparedness way to have folks who might be in a specific population that they have a plan for themselves, because it's to say that heat's more is more of a concern. Not so if you have a respiratory condition. So wanting to make sure that folks are aware that their own specifics are important to include. And then as we start thinking about all the different scenarios of, do you have air conditioning? Do you have a window unit? Are you driving? Like all these different are you working outdoors? There are so many different scenarios that we really can't give any great blanket guidance. And we really want to lean into folks educating themselves, getting themselves prepared, thinking about their specific situation so that when heat and smoke come along, they have a plan on how to manage. And then we're also doing some new community outreach materials. The folks with the county with WIC came to us and asked if we could develop some specific outreach materials, both flyers and some posters that they'll put in the clinics for specifically about heat and children and heat and pregnant people. Those are two of their big audiences. So we're working on those. You can see a sort of a draft we've got going to the right on the slide. And then we're also recognizing that outdoor events is really important, we're going to develop some guidelines to support organizers around preparation and action for both heat and wildfire smoke. And that is in progress, and we hope to have it out soon. And then a few sort of resources that we're sharing out. There's the heat risk forecast tool. So basically to give folks sort of like what to look for and how to give themselves the ways to keep track of both heat and smoke. So, these three we recommend to folks, and that's what we're putting out in our materials. And that would be it. It's the last slide. Cool. I think that was it. Happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you very much for that presentation. No questions?
Actually, I have one. I just wanted to clarify on the emergency visits for hood to coast. I'm assuming those numbers are just for Multnomah County and don't represent Clackamas or any of the other counties, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely good to highlight with those event organizers the concerns that you have, and we don't always do it, but if we see an extreme heat day, we do occasionally call the event organizers and say, hey, do you have a plan for this? So, it kind of depends on what the National Weather Service is telling us is the threshold, or what the heat risk is going to be. But sometimes having them on your phone list is a good thing.
Alice has a question in the chat.
Sorry, it's kind of a I meant to delete the question part and just put the link in there, but sorry. Because we created this several years ago for the Help for When It's Hot page. So I'd love to push that out there also.
Any other questions before we move on? We're doing dynamite on time.
Not a question, but a resource. CDC has a series of Ready Wrigley guides in both English and Spanish, and I haven't been in them in a while to see how that meshes with the imagery presentation you just had. But there are coloring activity books, probably for about that pre-KK age range, that you can get online from CDC and have printed if you want some extra heat tabling materials for summer. They have it for other topics too, but that one's salient now. I think they also have wildfires.
Will you stick that in the chat, a link? If you've got it. I was gonna look for it, but I didn't know if it was Wiggly or Wrigley.
Wrigley, and the Spanish version is Listo Calixto. And I just said that in my most Caucasian accent ever. But I'll try and find them and get them in the chat. And if I can't, because they moved them to a harder spot, I will make sure they get to Jamie and disseminated.
Thank you. Are we moving on? Okay, we're moving on. Thank you again. And we have made it. This is a bit of a marathon meeting, but we've made it to our final speaker, who is John Farmer from PGE. He's going to be delivering updates from PGE and specifically information we need about power safety, public safety power shutoffs. So take it away, John.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm John. I'm sure a lot of you know Drew Hansen, my manager. So Drew and I work very closely on emergency communications, emergency preparedness, wildfire, all of that stuff. I'm kind of at the center of the spoke, if you will, of all of our wildfire communications. So just going to talk PSPS for a few minutes. And I ran Hood to Coast last year, and my leg started at about 4 p.m. So I remember exactly how hot it was. It was very, very hot. I think the surface temperature was about 527 degrees out. So you know, things like that. So what I have here is our updated map that shows the technical term is high fire risk zone. You can read it in our WMPR wildfire mitigation plan, but suffice to say, the purple areas are areas that PGE has identified as areas of greater fire risk. And we're trying to use general terminology and language to make it just a little easier, because sometimes you have zones and areas and things, and it gets very complicated. So we are working kind of specifically with some of our emergency management partners, like in some of the counties, to share specific file imagery, but for customer communication, this is kind of how we are sharing it. And in case anyone here, before I keep going, in case anyone doesn't know what a public safety power shutoff, it is a proactive safety measure where we simply turn off power if conditions are such that it's too dangerous to operate equipment. Those conditions are things, essentially high winds, low moisture, low humidity, temperature. Temperature could be part of it, but it's usually the winds when it's really hot and dry out. And so it just means we turn off the power, and we basically reduce the risk that our power lines or our equipment become the source of an ignition for creating a wildfire. So this is, we have this information here. This is stuff that we share with our customers when it comes to, so I know, Jamie, I think in the invite, you included the communication toolkit. So when it comes to communicating and educating customers, we have, you know, basic PR 101 goals of awareness and education, and then confidence building persuasion, right? We want them to know what it is, but we want them to understand how it works and why it's important to be prepared. And so I think our preparedness messaging is very in line with a lot of everyone else here on the call. Have an emergency plan, have a kit, and make sure we can reach you, right? Contact information. And so those messages are reaffirmed kind of throughout everything that we do. I'll just throw up real quick the toolkit. This is what I shared with you. If you do not have this or it didn't come through, please, I tried to drag and drop it into the chat, but it wouldn't let me share files. So hit me up after this. I am more than happy to share this. But basically, this is your collective resource for educating your specific audiences. And we are grateful and encourage you to please share this information. It's organized, you know, kind of by easy to access online resources. We also share information outside of PGE. Like Oregon State Fire Marshal has to us, they are kind of the be all end all when it comes to defensible space here in Oregon, for example. We also, though, we have some really nice collateral. You know, we've got info sheets. We have stages of a PSPS, very simple, clean cut PDFs, JPEGs, things like that that you guys can download. You can share out. You can put it in a newsletter. And we've even got approved copy. So if you have a newsletter, social media, whatever it is, turn off my wife's phone. Sorry about that. And so this is your resource to please share that information. We super encourage it. However, if we find ourselves in a situation where we are considering turning off power, we have a timeline that we follow, being mindful that a lot of this is directed to us from the Oregon Public Utility Commission. So we have regulatory requirements that we have to adhere to when it comes to communications. The main thing you all should know is most, if not all, of your emergency managers will be notified at the 72-hour mark. Customers will not be notified till the 48-hour mark. So if your emergency manager calls you and says PGE's turning off power, that's because they get a day's head start. So what we recommend in the event of a PSPS, any inquiries, anything, any information you all share is to point everyone to PGE, because we will have an active PSPS page that we stand up, and that becomes the single source of truth information across the board. We've also updated our outage map. So whereas before, some of you may remember we had an interactive map where you could see the different high fire risk zones. That map has gone away. And so now everything will be on one single spot on our outage map. So if you are in an area that we are going to de-energize in 24 hours, it will show on our main outage map where if you lost power and PGE sent you a text saying, hey, you're out of power, that's the outage map it would go to. It's a much more streamlined experience, and it helps centralize and focus all of the information. But as you can tell, we have a very lockstep method for how we communicate. I'm in the middle of refreshing all of our templates for emails and press releases and Q&A and everything for all of these different phases. So again, it's a very specific lockstep process that we follow. However, there's always a caveat and an asterisk. However, if conditions arise to the point where it has to happen in 24 hours, 12 hours, whatever, all of this stuff gets smushed into a compressed timeline. Because in the end, the safety is paramount, and we want to do our part to, if we have to turn off power to help protect communities, that's what we're going to do. And I would also encourage, PSPS is not an emergency. That's the other thing. Yes, we're turning off power, but it is not in and of itself an emergency event. It is a response or a tool or a measure that we can use in response to extremely hazardous conditions. So whenever we talk about it in a very neutral to positive light, like, yep, it's a little inconvenient. We understand. And like, I think our Multnomah County folks were saying, sometimes we turn out, people in the rural areas lose power to communicate. We've talked to a lot of our Mount Hood folks about this. So we understand the inconvenience piece, but it's the safety piece that we are looking out for when it comes to this stuff. So I went through it kind of quickly, but it's all there. And so I'll pause for a moment if there's any questions.
Does not seem like it. I did see in the chat, I think Alice was asking about sharing materials. And you mentioned, John, that I sent around your toolkit with the invitation to this. Are you sending us your slides too?
So these are all, this is actually information you can get. This is an internal kind of PGE presentation document. So this specific one that you're looking at is probably less valuable, but in the toolkit, the collateral, the links to the collateral, those are a lot of really customer friendly, very easily accessible infographics and things. So I recommend, pull them off. They're just right there on our website. So download them, have them ready, put them in one of your newsletters. If you're putting something in a newsletter about PSPS or pointing people to PG, let me and Drew know. We would love to know so that we can, team up, bolster the efforts, things like that.
Any other questions for John, PGE? Okay, thank you very much to all of our speakers today. We've gotten through the planned part of the meeting, and now we're going to turn it over to general attendees. If there's anything that you want to share about your organization, especially going into this challenging summer, any resources, any suggestions, lessons learned, good of the order, go ahead, Alice.
Fireworks. I'm hoping that if anybody has strategies to reduce illegal firework use, I know Portland Fire did the veterans and pets kind of peer pressure. That's a very crass way to put it. I apologize, but Anything that isn't, one of the tools in the bucket is, do you ban the legal ones? But also, I'm pretty sure that banning the legal ones is not going to stop what is already illegal, firework use. So if anybody's done any digs or dives into fireworks, specifically on motivating behavioral change in people that are lighting off illegal ones, community like led churches, listening circles, non necessarily traditional communications efforts.
I can tell you, Alice, that we have maybe the beginning of some research. I certainly wouldn't, I wouldn't do a PowerPoint on it at this point, but in Portland, BOIC 911 teamed up with Portland Fire to do press conferences press conferences in advance of fireworks season, in advance of 4th of July. And one of the tools that we added, I believe it's been 2 years ago, is we have a form for 311 that 311 is hosts, and we also pay to staff up 311 on 4th of July to give people a place to go to report firework use that's not 911. So we're not making any promises in terms of, oh, your neighbor's setting off fireworks, we'll be right out to talk to them about it. But what we are doing is gathering data to see if there's any hotspots that we might be able to do enforcement on in the future. One of the interesting things that we learned is that a lot of the fireworks, and they're all illegal in Portland, a lot of the fireworks are being set off at Portland parks. So, we're in discussion about whether we're able to have rangers do extra patrols in Portland parks, whether we can direct more Portland police resources to show up at Portland parks. So far, that hasn't been a priority, but we're only in our second year, so we're just going to keep building on that campaign.
Yeah, the parks were also identified out here, but then a concern was raised of, okay, so we go to the parks and we pushed it out of the parks and into the neighborhood. And so I wonder if maybe a brain trust of I really think it's going to be community led. We just will never have the enforcement capable of stopping people from lighting them if they want to. Thank you, Jamie, so much for that.
Yeah, of course. And Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag two things. I mean, of course, we always have our crisis and emergency risk communications tools available to you all. I did want to let you know we are closer. I'm still not certain on the timing. We've set some internal goals around transferring our website. And I can show you a little bit just so that if we move your cheese mid-season, what that would look like, if you don't mind me stealing the screen. Let me just make sure I'm not on my email and sharing that. And while I'm pulling that up, the other thing I would want to mention, and I think this is particularly salient to the communicators, is that DEQ and I noticed over the winter that some news outlets seem to have AI agents detecting when they might want to issue a news article on smoke. We think they're probably using the agent to just anytime a monitor kind of picks up on USG air, it'll issue an article, Autobot kind of thing. And often it cites that there's an advisory in effect and people are encouraged to stay indoors, and it doesn't reference the official agency. And on several of those occasions, there hasn't actually been an official advisory. So they're not taking into account the official 24-hour thresholds and things like that. DEQ is working. I'm using media and social media monitoring, and as are they, to try and find those and have conversations with the outlets to get that corrected and let them know the concerns that we have. But we're also aware that we're heading into fire season, and we've only caught a few of these based on wood stove burning or prescribed burn. And so we're cognizant that that could create some issues for you all in the community if people are seeing in like Newsweek that Oregon is under advisory, and they're not. So just want to flag that for you. DEQ is happy to do some outreach. They've already been doing it. I can certainly feed that over to them as well if you bump up against it. I've also asked them to see if we can get some talking points pulled together so that if you guys want to do any outreach to reporters, that maybe we can kind of create a noise, a circle of noise that's going to get some change. But I do have the right page pulled up. And so part of the change, a number of the changes that we're making to the new site are driven by that ADA accessibility. And so this is just a sample of what our wildfire page might look like going forward. We're going to try and have everybody go back to the homepage for navigation rather than having sidebar. It gives us more space. And so this would be like the homepage. But the thing that's going to change for communications folks is we will have some key messages in the body, but all of our tools are going to be put into searchable tables rather than listed out with cute icons and things like that. And what it's letting us do is we can present the title in English and Spanish and English and the translated language, and put the link in on the translated so that folks can access it a little bit easier. And then you can also, as communicators, then sort by your audiences, whether it can be branded by partners and format, all those things. So we're hoping that you like it. It will be a move your cheese moment when we finally get to it. But just, I wanted to let you know how it's going to function so that when we move things, you're not completely discombobulated. That's it.
Anyone else? I've heard the word cheese twice and it's 11:53, so I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you everyone for coming to this meeting. I hope that you got as much out of it as I did. I think one of the most important things is that we all just acknowledge that we're dealing with a lot of the same issues at the same time, and we're here for each other. So if we need to turn the dial up from this being a joint information system to a joint information center, meaning that we're activated, we will, and we'll continue to inform each other and share our resources so that nobody here is going it alone, and we can be really consistent for our audiences. Anything else before we call it? Okay, enjoy your cheese, everybody. Have a safe summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Jamie.
Yeah.
I just talked to Elijah.
Oh, you know what? I still have the recording going. Let me
Okay.
let me cut that.
Ooh, let me say
Stand
some
by.
swear words. And there's the fireflies.
I
Note
should